All right, I think we are good to go. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, depending on where you are. My name is Howie. I'm a Senior Solution Specialist for DevOps at Oracle. Today, I'm going to be talking about, how do we leverage on OCI Cloud Native platform to build your application faster and more reliably. Right. So it's all about cloud native. I know it's no longer a new hot thing, right? So because now we have been talking about ChatGPT, which is the next hot thing, right? But who knows? They are actually building on cloud native platform, right? So that's why it's still a very important topic for us to talk about. So let's go into this slide, right? So this episode is actually part of our innovation series where we talk about how do we innovate with a platform approach, right? It's as simple as A, B, C, D, right? Literally. So if you look at the A, we are looking at artificial intelligence and machine learning. So how do we leverage on the pre-trained models, to build your AI-driven application, right? And how do we simplify your ML ops operations, so that you can, provision your machine learning models more efficiently. And we also look at how do we simplify the management of your data mesh, right? Which have different, the data is actually from different sources. And then we also look at blockchain and how do we deploy a Hyperledger-based application, and how do we focus on a more, blockchain application and ecosystem in the whole application development, right? And how do we simplify operations for your blockchain application? And the next one is, which is a topic of today, we are going to talk about cloud native, right? So how do we support, a CNCS-based, Kubernetes platform, and how do we leverage on DevOps to simplify your, application development from build, test to deployment. And then the last one, we are talking about digital experience, where we talk about digital assistant, which is kind of similar to ChatGPT. And last week, my colleague Rodney actually covered low code, right? So let's dive into the topic of the day, which is cloud native. Okay, so from a cloud native standpoint, on as a foundation, we're looking at the core infrastructure, right? How do we support cloud native application from the compute, from the storage, from the networking itself, and then at the top, we look at the whole suite of cloud native services, right, to support your cloud native development, right, from the runtime itself for you to deploy your applications or your microservices onto the Kubernetes cluster or even serverless function. And we also look at how do you simplify the design time, right, which is on the DevOps side of things. And once you deploy your backend services, as microservices, then how do we expose them to your external systems of application, right? So we look at API gateway or those security services that protect your API gateway. And then as your external system, you can actually extend your APIs that you build on microservices to things like Oracle Digital Assistant Platform, or even low-code Apex that we covered during the last episode. And if let's say you have a web applications that build on any popular platforms, you can actually integrate with the API as well, right? And let's look at when we talk about cloud native development, right? You cannot hide away from DevOps, because DevOps actually provides you the agility in terms of how do you develop your applications, right? So that's why when we look at DevOps, what is it trying to do, right? So it aims to establish agile culture and environment where you build, test, and deploy your software can happen very rapidly, frequently, and more reliably, right? That's the whole gist of DevOps, or what you're trying to provide. And when we talk about cloud native, right? So now DevOps, it actually focuses on the culture itself. But now we're talking about runtime. How do you bring the agility to the runtime, right? That's when we talk about cloud native, where we try to break those big chunk of monolithic application into loosely coupled microservices, so that you can become more resilient and more manageable and observable. So what does it mean for the business, right? So when we combine DevOps and cloud native, your businesses can reduce time to market because you can ship your application of features, new features, right, to the market even faster. And you also can improve end user satisfaction because the software or the applications that you deploy tend to be more reliable, right? So in the whole DevOps life cycle, we look at the first half of it is talking about the design time. How do we enable continuous integration and continuous delivery? And we on the right side, we look at the operation side of things, right? The runtime. How do we automate consistent cloud environment provisioning? How do we deploy a high performance cloud native application to the environment? And how do we enhance the application performance and reliability using some of the O&M services, right? So let's look at 4 of them. How do we fulfill them using OCI services? Right. So the first one we talk about, how do we enable continuous integration and continuous delivery using our CI/CD service called OCI DevOps, right? So I know this slide is very busy, but let me get you through. So what we're trying to achieve in OCI DevOps is that we want to provide you the automation, right? From building, testing to deployment, right? So the end-to-end process is actually automated without, human intervention as much as possible, right? So that you can increase the reliability and feature velocity of your applications by using the automation. And we also realize that security is very important. Be it any industries that you are in, security is still the top most important aspect of software development, right? So we actually provide a whole suite of OCI security services that you can leverage as part of your CI/CD pipeline. Things like if let's say you want to filter out any vulnerabilities in your application dependency, you can actually use application dependency management. And what if you want to scan for any vulnerabilities in your container images itself, right? So we have a vulnerability scanning service for you to scan for vulnerabilities in those artifacts. Okay, and next one. The most important thing about CI/CD pipeline is about visibility, because you have to know if, let's say, there's something goes wrong, then you will be able to pinpoint the issue and then you rectify it quickly, right? So that's why providing an end-to-end visibility is very important. That's why we provide a fully integrated monitoring services like from logging, from telemetry, and from application performance monitoring as well, for you to track issues and so you can rectify it as quickly as possible. And next one, we realize that as your DevOps ecosystem grows, right? So integration is going to be a headache, right? So that's why it's important for us to provide you a very seamless integration with other OCI services as part of the entire CI/CD pipeline. Or we also make it very easy for you to integrate with any other third-party tools that you might use, right? That brings me to the next point. We want to provide you the flexibility. If let's say you are already using any other DevOps tools, right, as part of your toolchain, you feel free to use them, right? So that's actually what we provide in OCI DevOps. If you can see on the the diagram on top of it, you see that you can actually integrate your existing GitHub, GitLab, or Bitbucket to OCI code repository, right? And then you also can actually trigger the deployment using Jenkins as well, using a Jenkins plugin that we provide to our customers or developers. And then if let's say you have any other open source tools that you want to integrate as part of your CI/CD pipeline, you can do that as well. Okay. So now next thing we're going to talk about infrastructure as code, right? So why infrastructure as code is important, right? Because we want to automate the infrastructure provisioning and management through code, right? Because the code will be the single source of truth, right? So what are some of the benefits of infrastructure as code, right? So first thing, it eliminates human error. If you don't allow the human or anyone to go into your environment and create any resources, you can eliminate human errors, right? And then because we automate not just the provisioning, if let's say you want to terminate some of your resources, you can do it as quickly as possible as well. That's why it actually allows you to save on hosting costs. You don't cause some wastage on your environment. And then we also reduce the provisioning time very quickly, because when you deploy your application using infrastructure as code, it's going to deploy as quickly as possible without using a few clicks, right? And it also ensures consistency. If, let's say you have multiple environments, you have pre-prod, you have maybe staging, you have production. You want to make sure that all those environments are consistent. Then by using infrastructure as code, you can maintain that consistency. Then how are we going to do that, right? So in OCI, we actually provide Resource Manager, which is our infrastructure as code tool, right? It's actually Terraform based. So what it does is that you can actually, let's say you already deploy your resources onto your OCI environment. Let's say you want to translate that into other environments as well, right? What you can do is that you to your OCI console, go to Resource Manager, and you can actually translate or discover those resources and convert it into Terraform stack, and then you deploy it to other environments as what you see in this slide. All right. Next, we talk about how do we deploy high-performance cloud native applications. So when we look at the cloud native platform that we have, we always look at from the foundation, right? So those security aspect of it and the governance aspect of it. So who has access to your resources? Who can deploy the Kubernetes cluster? Who can access the cluster itself? And then on top of that, then we look at what type of application or what type of workloads that you want to deploy, right? So if let's say you deploy a very GPU intensive workload, then you probably will want to go with NVIDIA virtual machines as part of your workloads. If let's say you're going to deploy a more efficient workloads that support ARM compute, you can actually utilize that as well. So we provide a whole suite of different compute chipset, from Intel, AMD, Ampere, ARM, and NVIDIA for you to choose from, right? And on top of that, our Kubernetes offerings, we actually focus on open framework. We want to make sure that your workloads that you deploy on OCI or anywhere, they remain portable, right? So that's why we want to focus on the upstream compatibility very closely. And then just now I mentioned about the DevOps. We actually integrate that very closely with our cloud native platforms for you to accelerate your software delivery lifecycle. And then when we talk about cloud native, it's not just about the platform itself. We already provide OKE, which is our Kubernetes platform. And then we also have serverless functions for, if let's say for those that want to deploy a serverless architecture. And we have a container registry for you to store all those container images. And on top of those, the networking is very important when you actually have different microservices that communicate with each other, right? So we look at how do you expose your application as an API through an API gateway, and then we also provide you this fully managed service mesh for you to deploy a service mesh onto your cloud native platform as well. And then if let's say your application is relies on streaming, like Kafka, this kind of streaming, you can use a fully managed streaming service on OCI as well, right? And then on the database, so unless you are deploying a fully stateless application, then you probably won't think about database. But when you talk about stateful applications, most of the time it's stateful, then you probably will want to think about how do you simplify the management of your databases as well. So we provide a fully managed MySQL service, and our fully autonomous databases from ATP, our transaction processing, as well as the data warehouse, and JSON database as well, as part of our offering. So how do we fare against other solutions out there, right? Because Oracle is not the only vendors that provide cloud native platform. But if you look at some of the things that we provide, right, it's actually it's unique to just Oracle, right? So when we provide OKE, we actually think through from two aspects, right? One is on the operations. We want to provide the operation as seamless as possible, and the other one we look at security, right? So if you look at we actually provide horizontal port auto-scaling and cluster auto-scaling for you to simplify you want to make your applications more elastic. You want to make sure that the platform can be as elastic as possible as well. And then we also give you ability to deploy it as a serverless Kubernetes as well, right? So this is actually our new offering. If let's say you do want to handle, scaling, you do want to handle the operations of your worker nodes, you can actually consider serverless OKE, right? So you only need to care about your application. And then from the security standpoint, we actually provide, image signing mechanism to make sure that the container image that you want to deploy to your Kubernetes cluster is actually from a trusted source. And then we also provide you the vulnerability scanning service for you to scan for any vulnerabilities in your artifacts as well. Okay. Right. So after we deploy, right? So next thing is about visibility, right? So we care a lot about the operations and management side of things, right? So if you deploy your application in the microservices, you realize that they are all distributed. So if let's say you are using a traditional monitoring tools, right, it might be very complicated because you don't know where you're going to deploy your applications, right? Because it's distributed. So we actually provide a whole suite of O&M services as well for you to monitor, not just on the infrastructure. We also provide you to the tools for you to monitor your application as well, right, end to end. So we have things like logging analytics for you to analyze if there's any failures or anything that might be concern for your application. And then we have application performance management service for you to do things like distributed tracing or even monitor your application from a networking standpoint as well, right? And then if let's say you have any external monitoring system or telemetry systems that you want to monitor from as a single pane of glass, we have a service connector hub for you to export the telemetry as well as the logs to those monitoring services. Okay. Yeah, so I'm going to show you what I just talked about, right? It's about how do we use Resource Manager to deploy our application using infrastructure as code. And then I'll be showing you how you can manage our Oracle Kubernetes Engine cluster using OCI console. And then I'll be showing you the automation of the entire CI/CD pipeline using OCI DevOps. And we'll go ahead and monitor our application performance using our application performance monitoring, right? So before I go into a cloud native demo, okay, let's see if we have any questions, right? Okay, so far, no question yet. I guess it's very clear. So if you have any question at all, feel free to post your questions through the Q&A feature, right? You can find it on the function, the Zoom function, right? Okay, so if without any question, let's start the demo. Okay, let's first of all, I'm going to show you how you can provision your a Kubernetes cluster. Okay, using infrastructure as code. But I realized that if let's say you are new to OCI or if you are new to Terraform at all, right? It will be very difficult for you to kickstart, right? For you to write the Terraform script and then to deploy your resources. It's going to be difficult, right? Because you have to learn the syntax, you have to learn what is an OCI provider and what are the modules that we provide, right? It's going to be difficult, right? So I'm going to share with you a hack, right? So how can you start it quickly? So if you go into OCI console, here is what you see, right? This is a Kubernetes cluster console. You can actually press on create cluster. We'll just go ahead and use a quick create option, right? For you to just key in a few parameters. Let's say I am key in London, okay, cluster. For this session, let me just put the date today. Okay, so I'm going to deploy it in my compartment, okay, using this version 1.25.4. And then I'll be using a public endpoint. If let's say you have a requirement to use a private endpoint, you can choose that as well. Okay, and then for the node type, you have two options. One is called manage, which you will be managing the life cycle of the worker nodes itself. Or if you want to use a complete serverless, Kubernetes cluster, you can choose virtual, right? So which I just explained before. So I'm going to go ahead and choose the manage one. And then the Kubernetes cluster worker nodes, I'll just use a private worker. And the rest, I'm just gonna use the same one. I'm going to use a VM standard E3 Flex. So the good thing about OKE, right, is that you can actually set the exact number of CPU and memory as based on your application requirements. Unlike any other offerings where you only have a fixed t-shirt sizes for you to choose from, right? So you can actually go to the slider, you can choose the exact amount that you want, right? So I'm going to stick with the default one, okay, and then I'm going to choose one. Okay, once I press next, you will be able to review all the configurations you configured, right? And then instead of pressing a create cluster, you have this option to save it as a stack. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to explain to you what is a stack later on, right? So okay, so now the resource manager stack has been created. So a stack is basically a collection of your Terraform scripts, right? So you think of a stack as, if let's say you have a bunch of resources that you define as a Terraform, objects, then you can create a stack where you can actually manage the life cycle of your resources through a stack as well. So things like, if let's say you want to do a Terraform plan or apply or destroy, those are part of a stack, right? So you just now you have seen that I have already created a stack, using the save as stack feature of OKE. Then you see that it has already created this stack, right? So you can see that it has already translated those configuration into a Terraform configuration. So I can download it. Okay, then we will quickly go and have a look at this. Just give me a sec. All right. So if you look at this one, the main.tf, right, is the Terraform script that OCI has translated from the configuration that you showed. Okay. So you see things like, the core VCN, it will provision an internet gateway, it will provision a net gateway, service gateway, and all this kind of thing. And then you also will provision your Kubernetes cluster as well, based on this object, right? So let's switch it back to this one. So if let's say you're happy with the configuration and then you want to provision it through Terraform, you can just click apply, and then you will provision the resources automatically, right? So once this is running, let's go back and look at my Kubernetes cluster. Okay, just give it a few seconds, then later you'll be able to see a new cluster being created as part of the provisioning. Right, in progress. Right, so if you remember, just now the name I put London OK cluster and today's date, and then it has already started the provision. Okay, so it's going to take about 5 to 10 minutes. So I'm not going to wait so long because we don't have whole day for that. But at the same time, if you go to Resource Manager, you will be able to see those configurations that you set, and then what are the resources that will be provisioned, right? Okay, so next, I'm gonna show you the whole CI/CD pipeline automation. Okay, so okay, let me show you the applications that I deployed so far to Kubernetes cluster. right? So I have this very simple, web application, it's a employee registration form, for the employee to fill out their details, right? So I have one is a pre-production environment, and one is running on production environment. Usually when you have you want to make sure that your application is safe to deploy to production environment. Usually you have two different environments for you to do all sort of tests in a pre-prod environment before you push it to production environment. That's what we're gonna do, right? So let me show what's gonna happen, right? So later I'm gonna push a code to OCI code repository. And then what's going to happen is that it will automatically trigger a build pipeline, and then it will build the Nginx-based web application into a Docker container, and then it will use this open source tool called Pally, right, to detect any accessibility issues. And then if it's okay, then you will actually push the container image to OCI container registry. Then the deployment pipeline will be triggered automatically as well. And then it will deploy the application to my test cluster, my pre-prod cluster. And then it will invoke OCI function to run a verification test. For this demo, it's very simple. We just basically go to this endpoint, and then it will just see whether it returns code 200, right? So if it's okay, then you will go into the approval stage. If let's say you want to make sure that everything is fine, you have done your due diligence before you actually promote it to a production environment, you can actually introduce a approval stage, right? Before you roll it out to the production environment. So this is what's going to happen next. Okay. So let's go ahead and just quickly change the color so that it's easier to see. So now it's a blue color. Maybe I'm just going to change to yellow color. All right, it's more striking, right? Okay, I'm gonna save. Then I'm gonna commit the change, and then I'm gonna push it to my OCI code repository. Okay. So I have already pushed to OCI code repository, and then let's see what's going to happen in my OCI DevOps. So this is OCI DevOps page. Let me just zoom it in so that you can see clearly. So I have created an OCI DevOps project where I manage all my CI/CD pipeline as well as my code repository. So just now I push it to my code repositories in OCI DevOps project. Okay. If you look at this, I have one, private repository. And then once I push it to the code repository, actually I have already set a trigger, and the trigger will automatically invoke the build pipeline. So if you look at here, okay, so what it does is that first it will actually provision a build runner based on the shape that you define, right? And then you will set up the build environment, and then it will actually pass the build spec file to do exactly what you have defined it to do. So what you want to build, it really depends on the build spec file. It's a very simple YAML file for you to define the process. Okay, so while waiting for this build process to be completed, I'm going to show you what I wrote in my build spec file, right? So in my build spec file, I have a few steps, right? So first, I actually want to put a tag onto, I just run the hash so that I can identify the exact version that I deploy to the environment. And then I also, this part, I built a Docker container for PHP, and followed by Nginx. And then I, build a Pally, test tool, right, as a container image. And then I, run the execute test, right, as part of the process. Then, if everything is fine, then I push the Nginx and PHP Docker images to Oracle, container image registry. Okay, that's basically what it does. Okay, so you can see that I have already built the Docker image for PHP and Nginx. And then, it's starting to run the web accessibility testing. Okay. as what I just defined in my build-spec file. Okay, right, looks good. So it has already pushed the Nginx PHP to OCIR. Then next one, it will actually trigger the deployment pipeline automatically. Right, just give it a sec. So here you can actually just look at what are the configurations that I've defined. Just now I mentioned that I have set up a trigger. So whenever I push my code to the this branch, okay, to this repository, then it will actually trigger the build pipeline, right? Yeah. So you see the build run hash that I defined as part of my build spec. So it actually returns that as an output to identify this particular container image. Okay, so the deployment pipeline has been triggered successfully. Let's go ahead and see the deployment. Yeah, so you see the first stage has been done, right? It has already applied the change to my test OKE cluster. So let's just quickly, right? So you see the test environment has been updated to the new version, right? Changed from blue to yellow. And you look at my production environment, right? So it still remains the same because I haven't promoted to the production environment yet. So before that, you will actually invoke this function to verify if it returns code 200. Yep. So it has been invoked, and then I receive code 200. That's why it passed the test, and then now you will wait for the approval, right? So this one you see, right? Actually, what I have defined, right? So I defined the approval to be just coming from one person. If let's say you require the escalation, right? You require multiple approvals, then you can set multiple numbers. And you might be wondering, right? If let's say you have any ITSM systems running somewhere, right? You want to integrate it as an approval mechanism, right? You can do that as well, right? Because when we invoke this approval process, you basically trigger an event. And then your event can actually forward it to whichever ITSM system that you have as a webhook, and then you can run as a approval process from there, right? So once you approve, then you will actually trigger a REST API back to OCI DevOps, and then you will actually approve this particular stage, right? So let's do it. Ready to deploy. So once I press approve, it will automatically provision this particular change to the production environment. Okay. So as you can see, right, the whole process from build, test, now to deployment, okay, everything is done automatically, right? So the only process that I need human intervention is the approval process, right? I don't want full automation. That's your choice. If you want to make it full automation, 100%, right? You can do that as well. So now is applying the latest version to a production environment, and then let's give it yep. So you can see now both pre-production and production environment are running on the same version, right? So now we are done with deployment, right? So next thing is about how do we monitor whether the performance is great, whether there's any issues, and then whether you need a further rectification or further upgrades, right, to your application. So on top of those monitoring services that we provide, or observability services that we provide, we also provide application performance management service as well, right? So I have set synthetic monitoring for both my pre-production and production environment. So let's create a pre-production environment. What I have configured, right? So in APM, you can set, like, for example, if let's say you are serving customers, not just in your own region, you are serving it across the globe, then you want to see what is their experience like, right, while they are accessing your application. So in this case, I set from Sydney, in Singapore, as well as Ashburn, but my application is running in London region, right? So let's go and see, how the performance is going to look like. So you can see from each vantage point. So how long did it take to actually run the particular, get command, right? And then you can actually go to the HTTP archiver data, right, to see which are the requests that I initiated, and then how long did it take to fulfill those requests, right? So then you can see, okay, so this particular index.php, maybe it's taking slightly longer time, and you're going to see how can you go and optimize it, right? And it also shows you, what are the requests that's coming in, whether it's SSL or DNS, which are the bottlenecks, right? Then you can actually pinpoint the issue and go and rectify it quickly. Right. So, and then, if you want to look at it, you can actually see, how long does it take for each of the vantage point to execute or monitor to execute, right? So you can see from here, it's taking longer time for this particular vantage point, right? Then you can see how you can go and enhance it, right? So those are on the O&M side. So that's it, right? So just now I have already showed you, how do you provision your infrastructure, your resources through infrastructure as code, and then I also show you how you can use OCI DevOps to automate your build, test, and deployment, and I also show you how you can monitor your application performance through OCI APM, right? So now let's switch back to our slide, right? So I just want to recap on the content as well as the demo that I just showed you, right? So the first part, I slightly cover how do we accelerate microservices adoption, right, on Kubernetes, because it's so simple for you to provision a cluster. You don't have to do a lot of prerequisite provisioning before you can actually spin up a Kubernetes cluster for you to deploy your application. You use a quick create option. You can actually just define a few parameters, then you can deploy a fully functional Kubernetes cluster, right? And then we also show you, other than Kubernetes, you can actually adopt serverless architecture as well, using OCI functions, or you can even use the serverless OKE for you to do that. And then we also showed you how you can use the infrastructure as code to provision your infrastructure in a consistent environment, right? And then we also showed you how you can automate the end-to-end CI/CD pipeline using OCI DevOps. Okay, so then I'm just gonna I'm just go through a few use cases and some of our customer references that which they utilize OCI DevOps and our Kubernetes engines, right? So AgroScout, they are actually agriculture tech startups, right? So they actually focus on the AI as well as drone imaging, right, to detect for any crop disease, right? So it's pretty advanced, right? So back then they actually deploy their applications or their solutions on another vendor, and then they actually bump into some of the a lot of challenges, right, in terms of how they deploy their applications as well as that application alone, right, it's not performing. So after that, they actually migrated to Kubernetes on OCI, right, our OKE cluster, and then they also deployed our Oracle database on OCI as well. By the end of it, right, so they actually seen 30% performance improvement for the application, and they also realized that by using OCI DevOps, right, they have increased their developer velocity by 140 times, right? So that's AgroScout. And then we look at CERN Open Lab, right? So they are a very advanced research organization. So back in 2019, right, they actually had CERN Open Days. So they require a very fast and simple reservation system for so many number of users, right? You can see on the slide. So they decided to deploy this application as a microservices on Kubernetes. And then they also leverage on our autonomous transaction processing as well to store those users' data, right? And then guess what? They managed to deploy the end-to-end system, right, within just 75 days, right? And then because they don't have to handle all the database, operations and maintenance, it also saves them a lot of times as well, right? Because they are using an autonomous feature of autonomous transaction processing. And then, so because of how fast, OKE scale, right? So they are able, during the peak time, they're actually able to scale their application in minutes, right? To handle those large load. So that's on the Sun Open Lab. And the last one, okay, I'm going to talk about this particular retail tech company called SnapTech. So basically what they do is that they, adopt AI and visual search to improve their customers' online shopping experience. So what they do is that, they actually migrate their applications to OCI using OKE, right? So they also utilize the ATP as well, right, to deploy the application. And then you also use the GPU shapes, right? Because they are running, AI services, they have to train their models, right? So they actually utilize the GPU shapes on OCI to run those, analysis as well, right? So by the end of it, right, they actually seen 40% cost reduction, and because they are using Kubernetes and microservices-based architecture, they are able to migrate their workloads, right, from their old platform to a new platform, right, without any downtime. Right. So yeah, that's it, right? So next we're gonna do a live lab, but before that, right, we have some poll questions that we want to send across, so that we understand where you are in cloud native and DevOps adoption. Yep. So there will be a poll that pops up, right? So just go and fill up, right? So it's just a very simple Q&A poll questions that we actually want to understand from you. Okay, we want to understand where you are at in adopting Kubernetes and DevOps, so that we understand you more, and then we can give you a tailor resources, right, for you to kickstart your cloud native development. Yeah. So we have some. I start receiving the answers already. Yep, just keep coming. So while you are answering, let me just quickly talk about the workshop itself, right? So you don't have to do anything, just focus on your poll, right? So basically what you are about to experience, right, is how do you deploy a microservices-based, e-commerce site called New Shop, right, to OKE. So you'll be able to experience it firsthand, right? How easy it is to create a Kubernetes cluster and start, deploying your application on a Kubernetes cluster. Because I realized that, based on the polls, a lot of you haven't really started adopting Kubernetes yet, and you are very curious about, how would it be like, right, to use Kubernetes. And we also see that a lot of you are still using a traditional, software delivery method instead of DevOps. And then it's very interesting, right? So, while we are talking about DevOps, and then some of, most of the time, it's still quite a bit of challenges in terms of, DevOps adoption, right? So that's why we want to see, whether is it because of the tools or because of the skill set or because of what, right? So from the poll, we can understand you better. Okay, so yeah, just keep the answer coming, right? And then let me just quickly go through what this workshop is about, right? This live lab about, because it's really about for you to experience Kubernetes in real life, right? So first, what you're gonna do is that you will set up the cloud environment. Okay, so for those that still don't have a OCI free tier account, right? So while waiting, you can actually go to this link, or you can actually use your phone to scan this QR code and then to sign up for a free tier account, right? The free tier account is there are some services that are always free, right, for unlimited time. And then there are also some of the services, we actually provide you free credits so that you can use it within a 30 days, right, of free trial period. So as part of this live lab where you get to experience Kubernetes, you will be using this OCI free tier account. Okay. Yep. So you can go to the chat. My colleague has already shared the link for you to access the hands-on lab. So once you click into the link, you will direct you to this particular page, Introduction to Cloud Native, right? So okay, so you can just press start and run on your own tenancy. It will bring you to this page, right? So I'm just gonna pause here, until you have done this step. Okay. If you have any question at all, please feel free to ask in the Q&A section. While you're working on this, if you have any questions that you want to ask about the some of the services that I showed you, please feel free to ask as well, right? This is the best chance for you to ask since we are here and we are seeing each other now. I mean, virtually. All right, I hope you managed to create a free trial account. Okay. So let me just quickly go through some of the steps with you real quick. All right. So first of all, you have already created a free trial account, and then you already sign into your account, right? And then now you are in the OCI console. Then next, you will need to set up the cloud environment to prepare for the deployment. So first step is really to set up your OCI tenancy, right? Then you will go and create a compartment. So let me show you. You can go to here. You click on compartments, right? And then you just click on create compartment and then just fill it up, and then just choose the parent compartment as root, and that's it. Right? And then after that, we will need to spin up the Cloud Shell. Later, it's gonna use a Cloud Shell to interact with your Kubernetes cluster. So if you are ready now, just go to the top. Okay, it will look a bit slightly different, right? Compared to the ones that you see in the live lab workshop instruction. Because we have already enhanced it with another feature called code editor. Okay? So later I will show you how the code editor will look like as well. Yep. So you'll be able to see the Cloud Shell console once it's created. Then next step will be to create a Kubernetes cluster, right? So you can either go to the site menu, right, and then click on the develop services and then Kubernetes cluster, or you just on top of the search bar, you just type in OKE, then you will be able to find this particular console. While waiting, maybe I'll just show you what is the code editor. if you look at my screen right now, right, this one is actually the code editor that we provide to our developers, right? So it's basically a cloud IDE for you to start developing on OCI directly, right? Instead of having to deal with like dependency and all this kind of thing, right? So if you look at Cloud Editor, right, okay, it looks this very similar to the popular IDE right out there, because they are all based on Eclipse tier project, right? So if you our OCI Cloud Code Editor is also based on the open source Eclipse tier framework. Okay, that's what you see from the look and feel, from the selection, from the way you interact with the terminals and everything, right? It looks pretty much the same, right? So and then you can also create like a terminal. So you can go to terminal and then you create a new terminal. Then you will actually create a cloud shell as well. So code editor is not just a cloud IDE. So when you create a terminal session, it's actually the backend is actually a cloud shell, right? So you can use either one of them. Let's say you're just gonna use a basic terminal, right? Then you can use Cloud Shell, or if you want to manage your code, you want to edit it, you can use a code editor as well. Okay, so can go down. You just now you have seen how to create a cluster. Just use a quick create option, submit it, right? And then follow the instructions to create a cluster. Okay, just choose the manage option. And then I think you don't need 3 nodes. 2 nodes will be fine. And then click next, and then you can just create cluster, right? But if you want to try out, the way that I did for infrastructure as code, you can save as stack, and then you can just go and export as well. You don't have to follow the workshop instruction strictly, right? So I'm gonna give you 10 minutes, okay, to create an OKE cluster, right? Then we will go through the further steps. Okay, I hope everyone is doing okay, right? For those that have already, created an OKE cluster, you can feel free to go to your cluster and just explore it, right? So you can see how you can actually scale it as well, if let's say you need to, right? So how you do that is that you go to node pools, click on the pool, and then just click scale, and then you can just increase the number of node count. Okay. Alternatively, right, if you are like me, you just created resource manager stack, and then you want to manage it as part of your resource manager stack. What you do is that you go to your code editor. You see there's an Oracle O logo there. Then you'll be able to see the OCI plugins, and then you see the resource manager. And then you just go down to your own compartment. Okay, let me search for my compartment. And then you will see your own stack. So this was the stack that I created. And then you'll be able to see the main.tf file, right? So assuming I want to scale it, right? So let me go down. So over here, you can see the full one. I want to increase it to 2, for example. I save it. And then I come over here. Okay, you right click to the stack, and then you can save changes and run apply action. Once you click that, okay, it will automatically create a job. You can see here, you create a job, and then you will create another worker node on the OKE. You can see how convenient it is, right, to use the code editor to manage your infrastructure as code, scripts. You modify it, you save it, and then you run apply. As simple as that, right? And then you will just go ahead and check for any changes needed based on the last state. And then if there's a state change, then it will go ahead and apply the change. So you see, now it has been is updated, updating. You can see that there's another node that's being provisioned now, right? This step is purely optional, right? So since we are waiting, I just want to quickly show it to you. Those that are still catching up, you can just follow the steps, right? So create a Kubernetes cluster, and then later 2:15, I'll be going through the further steps. Okay, I see there's someone that's just posted, the status, right? So you probably need to give it some time for it to create those successfully, because it will take some time for it to turn into a healthy state. Okay, so now 2:15. Some of you already, start exploring the Kubernetes. You have already starting to access it, right? So then let's go ahead and go through the next step, where you set up a Cloud Shell access. All right, so it's pretty simple. You just go to a Cloud Shell access, and then you just copy that and paste it into your Cloud Shell, and then you'll be able to see that, right? So let me access it. Copy. Then you want to check your controllers. Yeah, I'm seeing the same error message. Let me have a look at it. Somehow there's is unable to perform a health check, but it doesn't matter, right? I think we can proceed to this next step, and let's see if it's going to cause an issue. But based on what we check from the Kubernetes console itself, right? It's actually running, right? Let's look at here. We can see that it's actually there's no any unscheduled port, and from our node pool perspective, right? So it's actually ready. So these conditions are actually getting it from the worker nodes itself, right? So don't worry too much about it. Maybe that's just some of the health check that maybe fail for some reason, but we can proceed to the next step. Okay, next step, we are going to deploy the microservices app. So by the way, if let's say you want to make sure that your Kubernetes cluster is healthy, maybe you just want to check your nodes whether it's ready. All right. So if it's running fine, then we can go ahead and create the resources, right? So in this step, we are going to deploy this e-commerce website called MuleShop, right? So we are going to use a couple of components here. We are going to use the Helm chart, which is it's actually Kubernetes package manager, right? So if let's say you have any application that you want to deploy or you want to share with anyone, and then you can actually write it into a Helm chart. Then we basically use the Helm chart to deploy the application to our Kubernetes cluster, right? So basically that's what we're gonna do now, right? So first, go to your Cloud Shell, clone it. Okay, so you have MuleShop. So these are all the files that's being cloned into your local environment. So for those that are using code editor, basically what you can do as well, you can add a folder into the workspace. Okay, so I can actually explore the codes here as well. Okay. So next, right? So you will be able to see, the same thing right here. So next thing, we are going to set a context, right? So you can get context first. So this was the context that I just created. So you can go to Cube, config, rename, text name, and whichever context that you want to set, right? So let me just follow this one. So I'll just name it so that I will know. Okay, I have renamed it. Then I can create a namespace. So what namespace? Namespace called MuleShop. Okay, created a namespace. Then we will go ahead and set context. Namespace. Go to MuleShop. Okay, so basically what it does is that whenever you do any Kubernetes operations using the kubectl or kubectl, you don't have to specify a namespace because it has been set to MuleShop. Yep. So if you get pods, you shouldn't be anything, yeah, because we haven't deployed anything yet. Okay, so next we are going to deploy all these utilities. Okay, so these are the utilities that we require to deploy the the application. So let's go ahead and create this namespace. Okay, then we will update the dependency. So just to explain what this step does, as part of the Helm charts that we're going to deploy, using our MuleShop Helm chart, we require all these resources, right? As a dependency. That's why we are actually downloading those dependencies into our environment. So we are going to install all these dependencies, okay, using this command, helm install. So we just need to wait. So I'm gonna pause here, to make sure that everything is done. Yep. So you see that this one, as part of the chart, it has already installed, all these services, right? Including the ingress, Grafana, and everything. Okay, so what's next? So now we want to get the IP address of this particular ingress controller, right? So we will go ahead. Yeah, so you see that when we deploy this ingress controller, you actually create OCI load balancer, and this is the public IP address of the external load balancer, right? So we can also look at what are the components that were deployed as part of the Helm chart deployment. Yep, so you can see that the cert manager, the Grafana, and the ingress controller, and the state metrics and the metric server, to report the state of the particular of your pods, as well as the Prometheus as well, right? So those are being deployed as part of the Helm chart deployment. Okay. Now, so next step, we are going to install the eCommerce app, right? Using Helm chart again, right? So let's copy this command. Okay. Okay, so now it has been deployed, but the pods might not be ready yet. So let's go and see. Yep, so it's creating the container and stuff. So we will go and watch it, right? To make sure that it's done. right? So we will just wait for all the pods being created. Okay. So I'll pause here until all the pods are being created. If you have any questions, again, please submit your questions in the Q&A. Right, looks like all the pods are being created successfully. Okay, so next step is that we're going to access this application, right? So I'm gonna look at the public IP address of the ingress controller. There you go. So if you realize what's happening now is that previously we have already created an ingress controller, and then we have also deployed the mule shop into our Kubernetes cluster. And then what it does is that it will actually create a route from the ingress controller. Then when you point it to the public IP address of the ingress controller, you will actually route it to the mule shop, which we just deployed, right? So from here, your user will be able to buy some, nice little things for your cats. So yeah, so this is actually the mule shop, e-commerce that we deployed as microservices, right, on our Kubernetes cluster. So now what's next? So we can just go and explore, right? A few things that we can explore. So you can actually look at, what is the deployments, what are the pods, and then, you can even look at, basically just explore all the Kubernetes objects. So normally what we do is that, you can go to kubectl, get deployment. Then you see what are the deployments that we deploy as part of the, the Helm charts deployment. So you see that, these are all the microservices that are being deployed. We have user, storefront, session, payment, orders, and many, many others, right? So there are so many, microservices that were deployed. So then we can also go into describe. The deployment. Right, so if you look at here, you will be able to see, it's being deployed, using all these parameters, and then you can see that, it's being deployed from this particular container image registry in Oracle OCI, right? Called new shortcuts. And then you can see that we put some annotation for Prometheus so that when we deploy this application, it will actually script all these parameters and feed it into Grafana, right? And then, we also put it as a rolling update strategy, which is the default one. And then we put the replica as one, so that it will deploy just one pod. Yep. Right. So those are the things that you can actually explore. So you can also look at the pods that we deployed. Just now I just showed you that all the pods were being deployed and running successfully. Right. Yep. So that's basically the steps for task 5. Okay. So if let's say you want to deep dive into what's going on in the pod itself, so you can actually like kubectl logs, then you choose the, let's say, payment. So it will actually show you, the application logs. Okay. Okay. So let's just go and understand what's under the hood, right? So okay, so if we look at this file, okay, we go and see what's under the hood. We create this folder. Okay, then we go ahead and look at what's inside this Helm chart. Right. can see the image, or you can actually go here. You see all the charts, the API. Yeah, so these are the manifest file that is being defined in the Helm chart. So you can actually see, so those microservices that we deploy, the config maps, the service, how to expose them, whether it's a cluster IP or, a type load balancer, and then what are the annotations, what are the ports. So if you realize that, this particular e-commerce website is pretty complex, right? So if you were to, manage it as an individual Kubernetes manifest file, it's going to be difficult to manage, right? So that's why, this is being packaged into a Helm chart. So, next time when you release a new version, you can actually update the chart accordingly and deploy it to your, your Kubernetes cluster. Okay, very straightforward, right? Now, next one, we are going to see how, some of the metrics that we, provide to you to, monitor your Kubernetes cluster. Okay, so the first part is really to go and explore. Over here, you see during when we actually spin up the Kubernetes cluster, you can see that some are the pods that's not healthy, right? That's why it's stated as an unschedulable pod. After that it's settled down, then after that there's no more issue. And then you can also look at the node pool itself. What are the configuration, what is their state, how many nodes are there. Just now you remember I changed the number of nodes into 2. That's why these are the number of worker nodes that is available. And then if you want to look at the individual nodes itself, you can actually drill down to the worker nodes and see those performance telemetry, right, from the worker node itself. So basically you can go, you can scroll down, you can see the CPU utilization, that's available in your worker nodes, as well as the memory, the disk, network, right? If let's say you want to further tune it, let's say for example you look at most of the time is actually utilizing just 20%, or less than 20%. You can even go back to your cluster, okay, and then you can even update the specs as well. All right, so if let's say you look at, maybe you don't need 16 gig memory, you want to change it, you just change it and you save it, right? So then after that, it will be updated accordingly. So that's how you can achieve agility, and at the same time, we can provide good performance and save costs as well, because when you reduce the resources, you don't need so many so much memory or CPU. You can just tune it accordingly, right? So that's the beauty of Kubernetes cluster provided by OCI. Right, so we can also look at the Grafana as well, right? So if you remember, we, as part of the MuleShop utilities, we actually deployed Grafana and Prometheus, right? So we want to look at the Grafana. So let's go ahead and check this. So pop 3000. So this is the admin password from the Grafana instance. So basically what we do up here. Right, then you will load the Grafana. So the password over here. Then we will have access to our Grafana instance. All right. So if we look at the thing, you can see that there are some metrics being forwarded to Grafana. Right, we just need to take some maybe go and see the Kubernetes cluster. Yep, we're here. So we can see from the Kubernetes cluster, we have already exported, those pods, metrics or telemetry. Then you can see, which pods are consuming what, and then you can also look at, some of the metrics that's being exported out, right? So here, then just key in the variables, and you can issue monitor. Okay. Now the next one is really on the scaling, right? So if you realize this time we talk about how OKE is able to provide you the scaling, the agility for you to scale automatically, right? So there are two things that you might want to take note of. One is called horizontal pod auto scaling. So basically what it does is that it will actually monitor your pods utilization. Let's go ahead and see. Right, so you can see that we set the targets as 70% of your CPU utilization, right? And then if let's say it exceeds this target, then you will actually spin up more pods accordingly, right? So if you look at the minimum number of pods is 1, the maximum is 10. So if let's say we hit the targets, then it will actually scale it up accordingly, right? So if you look at all the replica set, currently should be 1. Right. So this. So now we want to deploy the load simulation pods. Let's go ahead and do that. Oh. So now the load. Okay. Yeah. So there's a pod that's called load. It's being created. Then let's go ahead and look at the PA. See if the utilization is increasing. Right, you can see some of them really increasing. Okay, let's just wait a while. Then see if the replicas will increase, right? Yep, so if you look at the MuleShop API, right? So the replicas already increased to 2, right? And then if you look at yep, so if you look at the replica set for this particular API, it has increased to 2, right? Everything is happening, without you realizing it, it's happening, right? So everything is being scaled up, so you don't even need to care, how many replicas they want to set beforehand, right? So you just whenever there's a spike in your application access, then you will just scale up accordingly, right? So it won't impact the performance, right? So you can see this one, yeah, going down a bit, right? So this is what we are expecting, right? So whenever the load is increases, then you can it will actually increase the number of replicas set accordingly. Okay, so let's just delete the load tester. Okay, I think for this session, our main goal is for you to understand, how can you utilize our cloud native platforms to deploy your microservices, especially on the Oracle Kubernetes engine, right? So if you have time, you can actually explore the serverless functions, but in this session we actually focus more on the Kubernetes, right? So if let's say you want to understand more about the functions, you can just go continue your lab and then focus, just go through the functions, parts, right? Then you can actually understand more how do we approach a serverless function, development, right? So for now, if you can complete until lab 3, that is very good enough, right? So you already have a very good understanding of how easy it is for you to deploy Kubernetes cluster on OCI, and then how easy it is, right, for you to manage your deployment using Helm chart to deploy and deploy it to Kubernetes, and then how easy it is, right, for you to scale your application accordingly without any human intervention, right? So those are the things that we managed to show you through the demo that I show you, as well as through the live lab as well, right? So if you have any more question, please feel free to ask me. Okay, we have less than 10 minutes. We have about 5 minutes, right? So if you are having any issues or you want to clarify certain things, please feel free to type in the chat, or you can even reach out to us, right? Then we'll be able to share you more, right? But for now, this is what we managed to show you in the short 2-hour session, right? So if you want to know more, right? So there are some links that you can go to, right? So you can see the whole suite of our application development services. Okay, go to oracle.com/application development. Yeah, so you can see on the chat as well. So we already posted the links, and then if you want to try even a lot more other hands-on lab, using your free account, please feel free to do that. You have 30 days, to utilize most of the services. And then if you want to know, what are the best practices, what are what are some of the architectures that's being deployed by other customers, you can go to oracle.com/sg/cloud/architecture center, right? So you can see all those blueprint or those best practices that we publish to the architecture center for you to take reference on, right? So if you are done with the live lab, right? So remember to, yeah, so I saw one question. So may I have the links, additional resources? Yes, you go to the chat window, you click on the chat window, you will be able to see, the links, right? So it's on the chat window. Okay. Yep. So if you are done with the live lab, please remember to tear it down. Okay, remove all the resources that you created, so that you have a lot more credits for you to try any other things, right? Using the hands-on labs. Okay. So before I end this session, I just want to share with you, we have the upcoming session on the 20th of April, where we are, one of my colleagues will be talking about how do you build the perfect digital assistant for your business, right? So if you want to do something, like what the ChatGPT does, you want to have more interaction with your customers using digital assistant, this is the session for you to attend, right? So remember, just go and register for it if you are interested, right? So there's also a link that we posted. You can go to the chat window again. That's the link for you to register for this session. Okay. So with that, thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you learned something from this session, and I hope you enjoyed the demo and the live lab as well, right? So thank you so much.